Have you ever been in a relationship that started perfectly, but over time, small changes left you feeling uneasy? Let's explore what those signs might mean. What if I told you that those small moments, the ones that you brushed aside, could be red flags? Red flags that, if ignored, could lead you down a path that damages your mental and emotional well-being. What if I told you that by recognizing those signs early, you could protect yourself from toxic behaviors that so many people ignore, only to regret it later? Today, we're talking about something serious, the 7 red flags you should never ignore in a partner. These aren't just warning signs, these are behaviors that could change the course of your relationship, and your life. But here's the twist, most of these red flags aren't as obvious as you might think. They're subtle, disguised as care or concern, but they're toxic nonetheless. You may be experiencing them right now, and you might not even realize it. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we talk about real-life relationships, the good and the bad. If you're serious about building healthy relationships, don't forget to like and subscribe, it helps the channel and keeps you in the loop. These hidden red flags may seem harmless at first but can escalate into toxic patterns. Let's dive into the 7 red flags you should watch for. Throughout this video, we're going to break down each of these red flags one by one. I'll show you exactly what they look like, why they're dangerous, and how you can recognize them early so you don't get caught up in a toxic dynamic. We'll also talk about how to address these behaviors and what to do if you spot them in your partner. Trust me, this is information you can't afford to ignore. Now, without further delay, let's jump into the first red flag, the one you should never ignore: constant criticism and belittling. You see, many people believe that toxic behaviors are loud and obvious. They think if someone is being openly cruel, manipulative, or abusive, it's easy to spot and walk away. But in reality, toxic behavior is far sneakier. It doesn't always look like what we expect it to. It can look like someone who is overly protective, someone who says they just want the best for you, someone who may truly believe they're helping you, when in fact, they're doing more harm than good. The scariest part? These behaviors often fly under the radar in the early stages of a relationship. And when you're in love or emotionally invested, it can be difficult to see the truth clearly. That's why understanding the red flags we're going to cover today is so critical. The earlier you spot them, the more power you have to protect your own well-being. I want you to take a moment and think about your own past or current relationships. Have you ever ignored a small comment, brushed off an odd behavior, or let something slide because you didn't want to rock the boat? Or maybe you didn't recognize it at the time, but looking back, you wish you had seen the warning signs sooner? You're not alone. In fact, a recent study found that 1 in 3 people have experienced some form of emotional manipulation or toxic behavior in a relationship without realizing it until much later. That's how easy it is to overlook these signs. And the longer you ignore them, the more they can shape your relationship in ways that are unhealthy, and often irreversible. Think about the long-term impact of ignoring toxic behaviors. We all want to believe in the best of our partners. It's natural. But staying in a relationship where these red flags are present can lead to emotional exhaustion, feelings of worthlessness, and, in some cases, can even make you question your own sanity. When a partner dismisses your feelings, gaslights you, or constantly criticizes you, over time, it can leave deep scars. These are scars that affect your self-esteem, your confidence, and your ability to trust others, even in future relationships. This isn't just about surviving a toxic relationship, it's about protecting your future self from the emotional and psychological damage that can linger long after the relationship ends. That's why understanding these behaviors now is so important. It's not just about avoiding problems in the present, it's about protecting yourself from long-term harm. Let's be clear, when toxic behaviors are left unchecked, they don't just affect the relationship. They affect you. The longer you stay in a toxic relationship, the harder it becomes to see it for what it really is. It can be easy to make excuses for someone you care about, and in doing so, you might sacrifice your happiness, peace of mind, and emotional health. Some people even find themselves losing their sense of self in the process. The longer you stay in a relationship that makes you feel small, unsure of yourself, or constantly criticized, the more likely you are to start believing those toxic narratives. And that, my friends, is the real danger of ignoring these red flags. You deserve a relationship where you're respected, valued, and loved for who you are. When you're constantly being undermined, criticized, or manipulated, it's not just damaging in the short term, it's damaging in the long run. That's why recognizing these red flags early is your first line of defense. But it's not enough to simply know what the red flags look like. You need to act on them. You need to stand up for yourself and not let these behaviors slide, no matter how much you care about the person. Because at the end of the day, your happiness and well-being matter more than any relationship. If you don't take care of yourself, you'll never be able to show up as the best version of yourself for anyone else. So now that we understand just how crucial it is to spot and address these toxic behaviors early on, let's take a deeper look at each of these red flags. These are the behaviors that, if left unchecked, can seriously affect the course of your relationship and your life. Let's jump into the first red flag: constant criticism and belittling. Now that we understand just how critical it is to recognize toxic behaviors early, let's dive into the 7 red flags you should never ignore in a partner. These aren't just typical signs of relationship stress, these are red flags that can be a warning of deeper, more harmful patterns. While some of them may seem small or even insignificant at first, they can quickly snowball into bigger problems if left unchecked. Why 7? Why these specific red flags? Well, each of these behaviors comes with a unique warning. Some are obvious, things like physical abuse or emotional manipulation, but others are much subtler. They show up in the form of comments, attitudes, and behaviors that don't necessarily seem bad on the surface. But over time, they can affect your mental health, emotional stability, and your trust in others. This is why it's important to understand how to spot these subtle warning signs so you can address them head-on. Throughout this video, we'll explore each red flag in detail, we'll break down what these behaviors look like, why they're toxic, and how they can harm you and your relationship. I'll also share practical tips for how to handle these situations if you spot them in your partner. This is about arming you with the tools you need to protect yourself, and to decide what's best for your future. Some of the red flags we're about to discuss may seem like they come from nowhere, like one day, things were fine, and the next, you're starting to feel uneasy. It's these moments when things feel off, but you can't quite explain why, that often turn out to be warning signs. And that's why it's so important to pay attention. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the first red flag, and I want you to ask yourself if you've seen any of these behaviors in your relationship. Our first red flag may seem small at first, but when it happens repeatedly, it can really start to chip away at your confidence and self-worth. The first red flag is constant criticism and belittling. Let's begin with one of the most harmful yet often overlooked toxic behaviors: constant criticism and belittling. In the early stages of a relationship, we might hear comments or feedback from our partner that are framed as helpful advice. But when these comments become a pattern, they cross over from constructive criticism to something much darker. These are the moments when you start to feel inferior, dismissed, or as though you're never quite good enough for your partner. Have you ever been in a situation where your partner would say things like, "You're too sensitive," or "Why can't you be more like someone else?" These types of remarks are usually couched as suggestions or helpful hints, but they leave you feeling smaller and more self-conscious over time. The criticism doesn't have to be loud or overt, it can be quiet, almost whispered, but it's always designed to make you feel less than you are. At first, you might dismiss this as just part of any relationship. After all, no one is perfect, right? However, when the criticism starts to occur consistently, it can have a devastating impact on your self-esteem. Instead of lifting you up, your partner's words are chipping away at your sense of worth. Over time, you may start to question your actions, your choices, and even your character. This steady erosion of confidence can make you doubt yourself and second-guess everything you do. When constant belittling takes root, it can lead to feelings of inadequacy. You may begin to feel as though you're walking on eggshells, unsure of when the next critique will come. It may even become a source of anxiety, where you're no longer thinking about what's best for you, but rather how to avoid criticism at all costs. This emotional toll is exhausting and, in many cases, will impact your mental health. What's worse is that over time, this constant critique can become normal. The more it happens, the more you may begin to accept it as just the way things are. But that doesn't make it healthy, and it certainly doesn't make it acceptable. Remember, you deserve respect, not constant evaluation. If you're unsure whether you're experiencing this, let's go over some signs to look for. Does your partner often say things like, "I'm just trying to help," or "I'm doing this for your own good"? At first glance, these phrases might seem innocent, even caring. But when the tone shifts from helpful guidance to belittling remarks, it's a red flag. One major sign is when your partner criticizes your appearance, your actions, or your choices without considering how their words make you feel. Maybe they comment on what you wear, calling it too casual or too flashy. Or they might dismiss your ideas and make you feel like you're not good enough. Over time, these small, almost casual criticisms can compound into a deep sense of inferiority. Another sign is the frequent use of comparison. For example, "Why can't you be more like someone else?" This doesn't just tear down your confidence, but it also makes you feel like you're being measured against someone else, which is unfair and damaging. When you're consistently being compared to others, it can foster resentment and strain in the relationship. No one deserves to feel like they're in constant competition with someone who's not even part of the equation. You might wonder, what's the big deal if they offer some advice or point out things I could improve? The danger here lies in the accumulation of those moments. Just one or two comments might not seem harmful, but repeated criticism can start to affect how you see yourself. Constantly being put down, whether directly or indirectly, creates a toxic cycle that's hard to break. If you've ever found yourself feeling worthless after an interaction, that's because these behaviors attack your emotional well-being at its core. With time, this can spiral into anxiety, depression, or even identity issues. You might feel like you're not enough, constantly striving to meet a standard that seems impossible to reach. And the irony is, the more you try to meet that standard, the more you'll find yourself falling short, because the goalposts keep shifting. This leaves you feeling stuck, unsure of how to move forward. But why do we tolerate this kind of behavior? Often, we may not recognize it as toxic in the moment. Our partner might claim they're just trying to help or offer their honest opinion. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that they must be right, especially when we care deeply for them. Another reason we may tolerate this is because of love or the desire to maintain peace in the relationship. You might think, if I just do this better, they'll stop criticizing me, or they don't really mean it, they're just trying to push me to be better. But the truth is, healthy relationships aren't built on constant critique. They're built on support, respect, and encouragement. If the relationship is truly loving, you shouldn't have to worry about constantly being torn down. Constant criticism has lasting effects. You may begin to internalize those critiques until you no longer recognize yourself. The person you were before you entered the relationship may seem like a distant memory, as your confidence has eroded piece by piece. Worse, your inner voice may start mimicking your partner's. Instead of being your biggest cheerleader, you become your biggest critic. In the long term, this can lead to low self-esteem, feelings of worthlessness, and the inability to make decisions without second-guessing yourself. You may stop pursuing your own goals or dreams because you've been made to feel like they're not good enough. The emotional damage can even lead to mental health struggles, including anxiety, depression, and a fear of being judged. So what do you do if you see this red flag in your relationship? First, recognize that it's not your fault. You don't deserve to be made to feel small or unworthy. If your partner is constantly criticizing you or belittling you, it's time to have an honest conversation. You don't need to defend yourself or justify your actions, you simply need to express how their words are affecting you. Let them know how it makes you feel when they criticize you or compare you to others. If they care about you, they'll listen and try to adjust their behavior. If they react defensively or continue the criticism, that's a clear sign that this toxic behavior is entrenched, and it may be time to reassess the relationship. We've seen how constant criticism can erode self-esteem. Equally harmful is when a partner refuses to take responsibility for their actions. Let's explore how a lack of accountability can affect a relationship. This behavior can leave you feeling frustrated, unheard, and trapped in a never-ending cycle of blame. Let's break it down and see why it's something you can't afford to ignore. Let's now shift gears to another toxic behavior that can seriously undermine your relationship: a lack of accountability. In healthy relationships, both partners acknowledge when they're wrong, take responsibility for their actions, and make an effort to improve. But when a partner never takes responsibility for their mistakes and always shifts the blame onto others, it can become a major red flag. You may have noticed that when something goes wrong, no matter what it is, your partner refuses to own up to their part in the situation. Instead, they blame you or anyone else around them. For example, if they forget to do something important that you agreed on, they might say, "Well, you didn't remind me," or "I was too busy with other things to focus on that." They make excuses instead of acknowledging their own failings. In extreme cases, they may even refuse to discuss the problem altogether, completely shutting down the conversation to avoid facing the truth. The result? The issue is never addressed, and the cycle of frustration continues. A lack of accountability is extremely damaging because it prevents growth, not just within the relationship, but also within the individual. When one partner can never admit to their mistakes, they stop growing as a person. Without taking responsibility, there's no opportunity to learn, improve, or move forward. For you, this means that you're left carrying the emotional and mental burden of trying to make things right. This often leads to resentment. If they never acknowledge their mistakes, you begin to feel unheard, unimportant, and dismissed. You may start to feel like it's always on you to fix things, to take the blame, and to carry the emotional weight of the relationship. In the long term, this dynamic leads to emotional exhaustion. It's draining to constantly fix problems that someone else refuses to acknowledge. And when accountability is absent, trust also starts to fade. If your partner can't take responsibility for their actions, how can you trust that they'll own up to something more serious in the future? So how can you tell if a lack of accountability is becoming a pattern in your relationship? Here are a few signs to watch out for. 1. When something goes wrong, they always point the finger at someone else. Instead of looking inward, they turn the blame onto you or even other people. For example, if they forgot an important event that you both agreed on, do they make it your fault for not reminding them? Or do they minimize the issue and avoid discussing it altogether? 2. They make excuses rather than taking responsibility. Instead of admitting to their mistake, they offer a series of justifications, things like, "I was too tired," "It's not a big deal," or "I didn't have time." These excuses rarely address the core issue at hand, and they avoid owning up to their part in the problem. 3. They react defensively or become angry when confronted with their mistakes. Instead of calmly discussing what happened, they may become irritable or shut down, making you feel like you're the one at fault for pointing out their behavior. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells every time something goes wrong, this is a major red flag. A lack of accountability doesn't just harm the relationship, it also affects your personal well-being. When your partner refuses to take responsibility, it creates a power imbalance. You might feel like the relationship is always on your shoulders, and this emotional labor can be incredibly draining. What's worse is the impact it has on your sense of self-worth. When your partner can't admit their mistakes or take responsibility, you might begin to feel like you're always the one who has to apologize, even when you're not at fault. This can make you feel small, as though your feelings or concerns aren't important enough to be taken seriously. It creates an unhealthy dynamic where your partner's behavior is never addressed, and you are left constantly trying to fix things on your own. This is unfair, and ultimately unsustainable. When you're in a relationship with someone who refuses to take responsibility for their actions, it can lead to emotional confusion and frustration. You may feel like you're stuck in a cycle where problems never get solved, and your concerns are always brushed aside. Over time, you'll start to feel like you're carrying the weight of the relationship on your own. This one-sided dynamic can lead to burnout. You'll find yourself constantly trying to fix problems, smooth things over, and make everything better, while your partner doesn't make any effort to do the same. This dynamic is emotionally draining, and it's incredibly damaging to both your relationship and your sense of self. If you've noticed that your partner never takes responsibility for their actions, it's essential to address it head-on. The first step is recognizing that this is not something you can simply overlook. A lack of accountability is a serious issue that can prevent the relationship from growing and maturing. When you confront your partner about their lack of accountability, try to do so calmly and respectfully. Use I statements to express how their behavior makes you feel. For example, I feel unheard when my concerns are brushed aside, or it's difficult for me when we don't address issues together. This approach can help prevent the conversation from becoming accusatory and allow room for honest discussion. However, if your partner refuses to listen or continues to avoid responsibility, that's a strong sign that this toxic behavior will continue. At that point, it may be necessary to reassess the relationship. Remember, it's not just about being right, it's about respect, growth, and mutual effort. If one partner is unwilling to grow, the relationship can't thrive. Now that we've covered the dangers of a lack of accountability, let's take a look at another toxic behavior that can slowly chip away at the foundation of your relationship: controlling behavior. This is something that often begins subtly, but if left unchecked, can turn into a major power struggle. Let's break it down. After exploring accountability issues, let's focus on a behavior that can quietly undermine your independence and self-worth: controlling behavior. On the surface, this might seem like your partner just cares about you, wanting to know where you are or who you're spending time with. At first, these actions might feel like acts of love or concern, but over time, they can transform into something much darker: control. Imagine this: your partner insists on knowing your whereabouts at all times. They text you repeatedly when you're out, asking where you are and who you're with. Maybe they even start dictating how you dress, what you eat, or who you spend time with. It might start off as casual suggestions, like "I don't think you should wear that," or "Are you sure you want to hang out with them?" But slowly, this behavior escalates, and you realize they're trying to limit your independence and make you dependent on them for approval. When a partner starts to control your actions, thoughts, or even feelings, it's a major red flag that you can't ignore. The more control they exert, the more you may begin to lose yourself in the process. Controlling behavior is dangerous because it undermines your autonomy and independence. Every healthy relationship needs space and respect for each other's individuality. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your freedom or the things that make you happy to please your partner. The danger lies in the gradual nature of this behavior. It often starts small, and at first, it can seem harmless. Maybe your partner wants to know where you are for safety reasons, or maybe they express concern over your friends. But if you find yourself justifying why you need to see a certain person or feeling guilty about spending time on your own, that's when it becomes an issue. Over time, controlling behavior chips away at your self-esteem. You begin to feel like you can't make decisions without their approval. This can lead to a loss of identity and independence, as your partner's wants and needs begin to take priority over your own. The longer you tolerate this behavior, the more difficult it becomes to regain control over your own life. So, how can you recognize controlling behavior in your partner? Here are a few clear signs that you should look out for. 1. Your partner demands constant updates on your location or activities. It may start as checking in, but if you're feeling like your every move is being monitored, that's a sign of control. You might start feeling like you have to account for every moment of your day, and this can quickly feel overwhelming. 2. They try to isolate you from your friends and family. A partner who is controlling might subtly criticize your loved ones, suggesting that they don't have your best interests at heart. They might even make you feel guilty for spending time with them, pushing you to choose between your relationships and your partner. 3. They tell you how to dress, what to eat, or who to spend time with. These might seem like small requests at first, for example, I think you should wear something else tonight, or I don't like that person, I think you should stop seeing them. But when these requests become demands and are no longer about your own preferences, that's when the control becomes toxic. 4. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. Are you constantly trying to avoid upsetting your partner? Does every decision feel like a negotiation to avoid a conflict? If you're not feeling free to be yourself and make decisions for your own life, this is a major red flag. Controlling behavior can take a severe toll on your emotional health. The more control your partner exerts over your actions, the more you may feel trapped in the relationship. This kind of behavior doesn't allow for personal growth or freedom, and it often leads to feelings of frustration and resentment. Over time, you might start questioning your own judgment or second-guessing your decisions because your partner has created an atmosphere where you feel like you can't trust your own instincts. This behavior isn't love, it's manipulation. A controlling partner will make you feel like your needs, desires, and dreams don't matter. Instead, you're forced to prioritize their wants and desires, losing sight of who you are in the process. Ultimately, this dynamic erodes self-confidence and makes you emotionally dependent on your partner's approval. Instead of a healthy partnership where both individuals contribute equally, one person becomes the authority figure, and the other is left feeling helpless and small. The long-term impact of controlling behavior can be profound. It can create a cycle of dependency and manipulation, where your confidence and independence are continually suppressed. You may start to lose touch with your own desires, goals, and sense of self. In relationships where control is a dominant factor, there's often an underlying sense of fear of rejection, fear of disapproval, and fear of confrontation. This can lead to anxiety, depression, and a sense of powerlessness. It also puts a major strain on the relationship itself. Instead of being partners, you become locked in a power struggle, where one person dictates everything, and the other is left with little room to breathe. Worse, controlling behavior is a key component in many abusive relationships. While it might start as small requests or concerns, it can escalate into much more harmful actions. This is why it's so critical to recognize it early and take steps to address it. If you find yourself in a relationship where controlling behavior is present, it's essential to take a stand. The first step is recognizing that this behavior is not healthy, and it doesn't belong in a loving, supportive relationship. You have every right to make your own decisions, spend time with your loved ones, and pursue your own goals. Start by setting clear boundaries. If your partner tries to tell you what to do, where to go, or who to talk to, calmly but firmly explain that you are an individual, and your autonomy needs to be respected. If they react defensively or try to manipulate you emotionally, this is a major warning sign. You may also need to have an open conversation with your partner about how their behavior is making you feel. Approach the situation with empathy, but also make it clear that this behavior isn't acceptable. If your partner is unwilling to change or dismisses your concerns, it may be time to reevaluate the relationship. A relationship should empower you, not take away your sense of self. While controlling behavior can limit your freedom, excessive jealousy is another red flag that can feel flattering at first but quickly turns toxic. Let's look at how jealousy impacts trust. Let's move on to another critical red flag that can slowly eat away at a relationship: excessive jealousy. At first, jealousy might seem like a sign of love, a way for your partner to show how much they care. Maybe they get a little upset when someone else shows interest in you, or they express concern when you spend time with people of the opposite sex. In small doses, jealousy might feel flattering, even protective. But when it goes beyond a mild reaction, jealousy can become a toxic, controlling force that damages the trust and foundation of your relationship. Excessive jealousy often starts off subtly. Your partner might question your friendships, saying things like, "Who was that person you were talking to? They seem to like you too much." They may start questioning your actions, your words, or even the people you interact with. What seems like harmless concern or insecurity can quickly escalate into possessiveness and mistrust. They might accuse you of things you haven't done, simply because they're unable to manage their own insecurities. Excessive jealousy is dangerous because it undermines the very foundation of trust in a relationship. Trust is crucial for a relationship to thrive. Without trust, there is no safety, no peace of mind, and no emotional security. When your partner becomes excessively jealous, it creates a constant state of tension. You may feel like you're walking on eggshells, trying to avoid situations that could trigger their jealousy. The real problem with excessive jealousy is that it stems from insecurity. If your partner is constantly worried about losing you to someone else, it shows that they do not feel secure in themselves or in the relationship. This insecurity can lead them to make baseless accusations, scrutinize your every move, and try to control who you spend time with. Over time, this will erode your sense of freedom and individuality, as you constantly find yourself trying to ease their fears instead of focusing on your own happiness and peace of mind. Not only does it hurt trust, but excessive jealousy can lead to emotional manipulation. Your partner might use jealousy to control your actions, putting you in situations where you feel guilty for just living your life. For example, if they accuse you of cheating when you're simply hanging out with friends, you might feel forced to choose between pleasing them and maintaining your friendships. This creates a toxic environment where your emotional well-being is always under attack. So, how do you recognize excessive jealousy in a relationship? Here are a few clear signs that jealousy is turning into a red flag. 1. Constant accusations or suspicions. If your partner frequently accuses you of flirting or cheating without any legitimate reason, that's a major red flag. For example, they might accuse you of having an affair simply because you've been texting a friend or because they saw you laughing with someone else. These accusations can feel irrational, but they're based on their own insecurities. 2. They monitor your interactions. A jealous partner may want to know everything about your conversations, your social media interactions, or even the people you hang out with. This could look like repeatedly checking your phone, asking who liked your posts on social media, or questioning why you're spending time with certain people. 3. They try to limit your social life. Instead of trusting you to make your own decisions, a jealous partner may attempt to isolate you from your friends, family, or colleagues. For example, they might say, "Why do you need to see them again?" or "I don't like how they look at you." This not only limits your freedom but also plants seeds of doubt in your mind about the people you care about. 4. They overreact to innocent situations. If something as simple as a harmless conversation with someone else causes your partner to react with anger or frustration, you're likely dealing with an unhealthy level of jealousy. They might even say things like, "Why do they get to talk to you and I don't?" or "Are you flirting with them?" Excessive jealousy doesn't just hurt the relationship, it's incredibly harmful to your emotional health. A partner who constantly questions your loyalty makes you feel like you're always on the defensive. This leads to constant stress, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. You start doubting yourself, your actions, your words, your intentions, even when there's nothing wrong. In a healthy relationship, both partners feel secure enough in their love and trust to live freely, without constant fear or guilt. But when jealousy becomes excessive, it breeds resentment. You start feeling trapped, as though you can't interact with anyone without facing an interrogation afterward. You may even begin to withdraw from others in order to avoid triggering your partner's jealousy, and this isolation further deepens the emotional toll it takes on you. This type of relationship dynamic makes you feel as if you're constantly in the wrong, even when you're just being yourself. It puts you in a position where you must apologize for things you shouldn't have to apologize for, all because of someone else's insecurities. In the worst cases, excessive jealousy can even escalate to controlling and manipulative behavior, where you're forced to hide your social life and limit your interactions to keep the peace. This creates an unhealthy, emotionally suffocating environment. The emotional impact of dealing with excessive jealousy is far-reaching. First, it affects your self-esteem. When your partner accuses you of things you haven't done or constantly questions your actions, you start to feel like you're always in the wrong. This self-doubt can spiral, affecting your confidence and the way you view yourself in the relationship. Second, it leads to emotional dependency. Your partner might use their jealousy as a way to gain control over you. If they can make you feel guilty for spending time with others, they increase their emotional grip on you. This can create a sense of emotional dependence, where you feel like you need their approval or validation to feel good about yourself. Lastly, the constant stress and anxiety of dealing with jealousy can lead to burnout. You'll find yourself trying to please your partner at the expense of your own happiness. Eventually, you may start feeling emotionally numb or disconnected, as the emotional labor of managing their jealousy becomes too overwhelming. This toll on your mental health is serious, and it's something you should not ignore. If you notice excessive jealousy in your relationship, it's essential to address it early on. Start by having an honest conversation with your partner about how their jealousy is making you feel. Use I statements to express how their behavior is affecting you emotionally, such as, "I feel overwhelmed when you accuse me of flirting with others," or "I feel like my relationships with others are being questioned when I just want to spend time with my friends." Setting boundaries is also crucial. If your partner tries to control who you hang out with or constantly monitors your social interactions, calmly but firmly set limits on their behavior. Explain that you understand their concerns but that their jealousy is crossing a line. Let them know that trust is vital for a healthy relationship, and that you need your own space and freedom to maintain your emotional health. If your partner refuses to acknowledge their jealousy as a problem or becomes defensive when you bring it up, this could be a sign that they are unwilling to change. In such cases, it may be necessary to reconsider the relationship. If jealousy continues to dominate the dynamic, it could lead to emotional manipulation or even abuse. You deserve a partner who trusts you, values your independence, and respects your relationships with others. Excessive jealousy often leaves you questioning your partner's trust. But what happens when you begin to question your own reality? That's where gaslighting comes in. Let's move on to one of the most harmful and insidious toxic behaviors that can occur in a relationship: gaslighting. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation in which a partner systematically makes you question your reality, memory, or perception of events. At first, you might think they're just being dismissive or forgetful. But over time, gaslighting can cause you to doubt yourself and your own sanity. Here's how it might start. Your partner might deny things that you know happened. For example, you could clearly remember a conversation where they said something hurtful, but when you bring it up, they deny it ever happened, insisting that you're imagining things. They might also twist the truth, changing the narrative to make you feel like you're the one at fault. This could look like them saying, "You're being too sensitive," or "I never said that, you must be confused." Gaslighting doesn't always have to be about big, dramatic moments. It often starts in small, subtle ways. Maybe they tell you that you're overreacting when you're simply expressing your feelings. Over time, you might begin to second-guess your memory and feel like you're the one causing problems when, in reality, it's their manipulation at work. Gaslighting is dangerous because it undermines your ability to trust yourself. It's not just about the present moment. It creates a long-term psychological effect that can erode your confidence and mental health. When you're constantly told that your perception of reality is wrong, you begin to question everything, including your own emotions, memories, and judgments. The problem with gaslighting is that it's a form of emotional abuse. It isn't about making a mistake or having an occasional disagreement, it's about deliberately making you doubt your own reality to maintain control over you. Over time, this can lead to a loss of self-esteem and a distorted sense of reality. You might feel confused, anxious, or even paranoid, not knowing who to trust, including yourself. One of the most toxic aspects of gaslighting is that it often makes you feel like you're going crazy. This can lead to a severe emotional toll, causing depression, anxiety, and feelings of helplessness. The longer this manipulation continues, the harder it becomes to trust yourself, and the more dependent you may feel on your partner for validation and clarity. So, how can you spot gaslighting in a relationship? Here are some clear signs that gaslighting may be taking place. 1. They deny things you know to be true. Gaslighters will often deny conversations or events that happened, even when you know they occurred. For example, they may say, "That never happened," or "You're remembering it wrong," even though you have a clear recollection of the event. They might even accuse you of imagining things or exaggerating. 2. They dismiss your feelings. If you express how something makes you feel, they might brush it off as you being too sensitive or overreacting. Rather than acknowledging your emotions, they invalidate them, making you feel like your feelings aren't valid or important. 3. They use your doubts against you. Gaslighters often know how to make you question yourself. They might say things like, "I don't know why you're so upset," or "You've always been the dramatic one." These comments are designed to make you feel like your reactions or emotions are unreasonable or unfounded. 4. They manipulate the facts. Gaslighting often involves twisting the facts to confuse you. They may tell you things like, "That's not what happened," or "You're the only one who remembers it that way." This distorts your sense of reality and makes it harder for you to trust your own memory and perception of events. 5. They make you feel like you're crazy. A key sign of gaslighting is when you start to feel like you're losing your mind. If your partner constantly contradicts your reality or makes you feel like you're imagining things, this is a red flag that you're being gaslit. Gaslighting is incredibly dangerous to your mental and emotional well-being. Over time, it can create deep-seated confusion, making you feel like you can't trust yourself or anyone else. The psychological toll it takes is significant. You may start feeling disoriented, anxious, or even paranoid, unsure of what is real and what's not. This ongoing manipulation can lead to depression, self-doubt, and a weakened sense of self-worth. One of the most harmful effects of gaslighting is that it isolates you. Since you begin to question your own judgment and perception, you may start withdrawing from others. You might avoid talking about your relationship with friends or family for fear of looking crazy or not being believed. Over time, this isolation only strengthens the gaslighter's control over you, making you more dependent on them for your sense of reality and validation. Gaslighting also destroys trust. In a healthy relationship, trust is built on open communication and mutual respect. But when your reality is constantly questioned, it becomes impossible to trust your partner, and that trust is essential for the relationship to thrive. The long-term impact of gaslighting can be profound. It can cause you to lose touch with your own identity. Over time, you may become so accustomed to questioning your thoughts and feelings that you no longer trust your instincts. You may even begin to lose confidence in your ability to make decisions, relying more and more on your partner to tell you what's real. This manipulation can also lead to serious emotional distress. It can contribute to anxiety, depression, and even a diminished sense of self-worth. Gaslighting often erodes your sense of who you are, leaving you feeling empty, confused, and anxious. In some extreme cases, this can lead to long-term trauma, which can affect your relationships and mental health for years to come. Another long-term impact is that gaslighting can make it more difficult for you to recognize healthy relationships in the future. If you've been manipulated for so long, you may struggle to trust new partners or be able to discern the difference between healthy communication and toxic manipulation. If you're experiencing gaslighting in your relationship, it's important to take action as soon as possible. Recognizing the signs is the first step in regaining control over your reality. If your partner constantly denies things that are true or tries to twist your perception of events, it's crucial to trust your own memory and judgment. The first step to addressing gaslighting is setting boundaries. Let your partner know that their manipulation is unacceptable. Be clear and assertive in expressing that you will not tolerate them twisting the truth or invalidating your emotions. This might be difficult, especially if they try to turn the situation around and make you feel like you're the problem, but remember, you deserve to have your reality respected. It's also important to talk to trusted friends, family, or a counselor who can help you validate your experiences and provide support. Gaslighting thrives in isolation, so reaching out for help can be a key part of regaining your confidence and understanding that you're not crazy, your feelings are real, and your perceptions are valid. Finally, if the gaslighting continues or escalates, it may be time to reevaluate the relationship.